No
Cool.
problem. Let's see here. Awesome. All right, so I'll go ahead and get started, and dive into it. If folks hop in, we can kind of give them a recap there. But I guess what it'd be really helpful to do is just go around and give a quick introduction so we get a good sense of who's here. So my name is Ryan. My official title is co-founder and president of Arist. We're a team of about 12 now. Basically, we're in the business of text message learning, and so we work with different enterprises, governments, nonprofits, to build, launch, and assess text message-based courses. So excited to kind of give everyone today an overview of what these are, how they work, what are great use cases for them, and all of that fun stuff. Amy, I'll sort of pass the baton over to you to give a quick introduction, though I think most folks here know you.
They all know me pretty darn well. So I brought a handful of people together who I thought would find this very useful. And I'll tell you, I've been using these text message courses for almost a year-ish now, and I think they're a really useful tool in Learning Toolkit. I'm trying to use them more, but I thought that you would find them interesting, and just enjoy spending an hour on the line with other people that are good humans. So that's why we're all here, and I'm appreciative of you joining, but I think you're actually going to see a lot of benefit, or know people who will see benefit from what Ryan's going to share. So I can't say enough good things. I think it's a kind of great way to do reinforcement and solve some of the momentum challenges that I know have plagued learning and sales enablement for many, many years. So I'm glad you're here because you're going to take things away. So that's me. You all know me.
And then maybe since from the other folks, it'd just be great to hear, what organization you're calling from and just one thing you'd kind of hope to learn today. And I'll make sure I cover things specific to that. So Amy, you're next on my screen. Other Amy, I'll pass it down to you.
So I'm Amy Scott. I'm from VMware, and I work on the enablement team there. Worked with Amy pretty extensively. So I just kind of want to know what this is all about. This is very new.
Awesome. Allison, you're next here, so I'll pass it to you over. That's okay.
I'm Allison Strachey. I work for Deloitte Professional Services Organization, and I lead our milestones and transitions portfolio. So bringing new hires in the door, helping to support them as they take on new leadership roles as managers, senior managers, or partners in our firm. And then also supporting transitioning professionals who are becoming Deloitte alumni, colleagues for life, we like to call them, with transition coaching and ongoing alumni development support. We have a lot of new technologies that we've been using over the last year, given all of our learning has been virtual. And some of my audiences are, brand new hires, campus hires coming directly, from university into their first job at Deloitte. So we're really trying to do more with mobile, particularly for the new hire audience. So curious to see if there are opportunities for us to use this text message learning as a supplement to what we're doing today.
Awesome. And then Nicole,
that's exciting. That leaves me. Yeah. Yep. So hi, Nicole Brigandy. So I'm based in the UK. I recently, over the lockdown, started a consultancy with two of my two business partners, and the whole aim of what we do. So it's called Kindred Consulting, and what we do is to try and help work with organizations now shift out of post, COVID land into figuring out their COVID X strategy, whatever it is. And a lot of what we're working with people on is, what will the future look like? How do we kind of work in blended remote and possibly going back into the office type workplaces? And, the range of services we offer is everything from, facilitating through really, really tricky strategic issues and bringing leadership teams together to consulting around kind of more human-focused behaviors in the workplace, everything from organization design to culture and ways of working. So why I wanted to learn is, first of all, this is really cool. And I just wanted to kind of be exposed to where learning is going. And this definitely seems like a really accessible form of it. So I'm excited to learn.
Awesome.
Thanks for having me.
Great. So of course, my pleasure. And it's great to have you all here. I think based on what everyone touched upon, this would be a perfect kind of overview of everything. I'll dive into some of the use cases specifically that some of you mentioned, but I think, they're all very good use cases for what we do. So let me just share my screen here. I'll go through this on a high level pretty quickly, and then I want to make sure I leave plenty of time for questions. Not sure if we need the whole hour, but we've got the time if folks, as much as you want to ask things, dive into, and I'll often pause to see what would be useful to hear next. So quick introduction to text message learning. Our company, again, is called Arist, and so in 2018, we actually invented the text message course as a way to train students in the Yemeni war zone. So like Nicole, you just mentioned accessibility. We were actually founded from a place of, helping students in emerging markets and seeing what would kind of a content light, internet light model of learning look like. So we designed this learning system that would allow for teaching over SMS and for WhatsApp. What we quickly realized is that while that was really effective for nonprofits, for aid workers, it was actually being picked up even more by Fortune 500 enterprises, primarily here in the US, for things like employee training, for use cases I'll get into soon, everything from onboarding to safety and compliance to diversity and inclusion training, just because of a number of benefits of the model itself. And so today we help dozens of companies, governments, nonprofits, folks like Pinterest, Amazon, DuPont Sustainable Solutions, the state of California, to create, launch, and assess text message-based courses. And we'll kind of dive into more what that is and how that works. And so again, today we'll cover what text message courses are and how they work, the benefits of this specific medium, what types of use cases are best for this format, and how to identify those use cases and kind of get started at your organization with a sandbox and play around with it and workshop it around. So a few common training difficulties that learning leaders or that talent development folks will often come to us with is saying, look, I have really great content, but kind of limited delivery options, especially in a COVID first world. We've kind of gone to grabbing a presentation, getting on a Zoom call, and that's good for a small group, but not very scalable. Additionally, they'll tell us that employees are not taking or finishing their coursework. And so employees have really limited time right now. They're seeing a lot of video fatigue, and that learning doesn't really fit in seamlessly to the day-to-day of what their learners are doing. All of this is challenging because that friction leads to really limited exec buy-in. And so it's really hard to actually get anyone to see that learning is working when it's hard to get employees to finish that coursework, to respond to things in the first place. And so, the benefits of text messages, first off, 95% of employees will open a text message within 3 minutes of getting it. And so hence response rates, engagement rates, learner satisfaction scores that are up to 10 times higher than other learning mediums like rich media, microlearning apps, or any other forms of e-learning. They use really bite-sized content, as you'll see soon, and so it meets employees where they are. And additionally, it provides really meaningful learning outcomes. And so, I'll send along a few materials after, including our white paper. But what we see is, based on a lot of research we've done, text messages are the most effective way to create meaningful behavior change, knowledge retention, and really measurable outcomes outside of just completion rates and satisfaction scores. Additionally, they're highly scalable. And so we've had folks reach 1,000, 10,000, 100,000 learners all in just a few clicks, even those who might not have a laptop or an LMS, like deskless employees. And additionally, they're very fast to create. So most folks will build their first text message course within just a few hours or within a day, as opposed to weeks or months it can take to create a rich media or a video-based tool that's then hard to adapt or to update. So again, this is some of the research that we initially were based on with Dr. Susanna Loeb out of Stanford, where texting led to positive results. It was actually a study based on preschoolers. And so we actually took a lot of this research, applied it to the corporate learning world, did the whole white paper on it, and found a lot of the same things to be true. And so the Arist course model, at this point, you're probably thinking, what does a text message course actually look like? The average course is about 2 screen lengths of content on a standard phone, or about 1,200 characters. That's delivered to a learner's phone at a time that they will self-select over anywhere from 5 to 30 days. The average course is about 15 days, or about 2 to 3 weeks. And so additionally, that includes some sort of an image or a GIF, a longer form case study explanation, and we'll provide a lot of guides, templates, and things like that to show folks how to write in this shorter format, and a lot of our best practices there. Courses can include links to resources, you can add assessment questions, there can be interactive quizzes and responses, and you can even gate responses based on what learners say back. And so if I ask a multiple choice question, you answer A instead of B, we can do custom responses and kind of back and forth just based on that. So additionally, what we like to say to folks is just think of it as you're getting several texts at a certain time every day. takes you about 5 to 10 minutes per day, and over 10 to 15 days, you can learn a really, really meaningful amount of information. So Arist courses, they leverage text for frictionlessness, immediacy, behavior change. We intentionally, in our model, at least for text message learning, will space course days out. And so they used spaced learning and spaced repetition to improve knowledge retention. You can't, for example, send an entire course at once, even though some learners might want it. The reason being, if you ask them 2-3 days out, they'll forget most of what you've taught them in the first place. And then they're very bite-sized, interactive, and personal. And so we often hear the biggest thing learners will say is, this was really easy. I didn't have to learn something else. I just needed to text right back. So courses are built in an Arist dashboard. I can show you after what it kind of looks like to input content and to build a course, but this is just kind of a high level for visualizing how do I actually go in here. It's our goal to make this as easy as writing a text message. There's no tool onboarding that's needed on your side. So you're literally just plugging in images, content, questions, and kind of deploying it to users from there. So a few business impacts that we'll see, a typical 500-person company will lose over 100 grand a year just in time savings due to long training. One Arist course day equals about 20 to 30 minutes of in-classroom training. So we see up to 75 or 80% time savings within a typical organization, just right off the bat for the time it takes to develop learning materials that they're often, getting designers on for really rich media in-depth tools. When they're doing really scalable training. And then it's also far cheaper to build versus a video course. And so typically, 1 grand in time savings versus about 10 grand. Additionally, what we really see that's even more measurable at organizations is just higher adoption and satisfaction. And so employees really loving their training is always a good thing. Obviously, we see over 90% satisfaction rates. But for learning designers, again, the biggest thing they'll tell us is that it kind of just unleashes the potential of engaging with folks where they are. When you get 10, 20 times as many responses as you would to a normal course, obviously the second, third tier impacts of that are going to be much higher. So I'll pause here and just kind of take any questions. Next step we'll dive into is what our course is best for, but any questions just on what text message courses are or about the course model?
It took me a whole 5 minutes to get started. So if that tells you anything, if I can figure it out, so can you. And the fact that it's very quickly editable and changeable, I think is one of the big benefits too.
Awesome. Thanks, Amy. Nicole, I saw you unmuted your mic. I didn't know if you had a thought there as well.
No, I'll hold for now. I'm gonna stay in listening mode. This is exciting though. I'm nervous, but also excited.
Yeah, no worries. It's a brand new thing, and some folks are like, "This seems cool, but I have no idea what to think about it right now," and that's totally fine. We've got really talented folks who are on hand to kind of help with getting started as slowly or as quickly as you'd like. So next question we get all the time is, all right, this seems interesting. What are text message courses actually used for? So a bit of kind of qualifying use cases here. So some of our favorite use cases, the things we'll see all the time, things like course reinforcement and nudges. And so if you're doing a more kind of in-depth training, doing a series of texts as a scaffolding or as just reminders daily to remind folks, that's about 20 to 30% of use cases. About 70% of use cases are completely standalone in about of how customers use us. And so they'll do entire trainings just over a text message course. And so those will see things like safety and compliance training, culture building, company history, introducing someone to a company and onboarding them, professional development, leadership and skills training, customer training if you're doing something public. And so often, we just, for example, did a course with AWS where they were training folks on how to use, microservices. And so we see a lot of use cases there as well, just for sort of customer education. But a few things to kind of think about when you're picking a specific use case. We'll actually do needs exploration for free with folks and just decide for what you want to do, is this a good idea or not? So a few things to keep in mind. Text message courses are really good for behavior change, knowledge retention as outcomes, large scale supplementations or trainings. And so where you're training a lot of folks the same set of simple or standard concepts. So things like basic manager training, compliance training, you're going to see onboarding, you're going to be doing most of the same types of trainings to all these same folks. Things that, text message courses aren't as good for, that I'd rely on an expert like Amy for example, would be something that's more, highly personalized learning journeys, collaborative learnings. If you're training a small, group of executives, for example, or any sort of in-depth specialist or technical training. And so what we've seen is that about 70 to 80% of all the trainings a organization does can be partially or wholly onboarded into text message just because of how simple the concepts are. About 20% is more highly specialized trainings, and we'll be very honest about, okay, this probably isn't as great of a use case. And so just kind of some practice in, in qualifying these sorts of things. So if folks want to unmute their mics and just give a quick guess here, we want to teach JavaScript to new engineers, leadership to company execs, best practices for OKRs to all company managers, and customers about new product offerings. Any guesses about which of the above you might want to teach or not want to teach over text?
I would pick the last one first, the customers about new product offerings, just because it feels like it'd be easy to get information quickly to people and to use, links to show offerings and to gather a lot of questions from that population back through a very simple response in text.
Yep, absolutely. That's exactly right. Other from Amy and Nicole, other guesses or thoughts as to what might work or not work well?
I don't think JavaScript would work well. Leadership may or may not work, depending on what to convey. Like if it's little bite-sized thoughts, then
they actually might enjoy it because they have no time and they're all stuffed in their phones anyway.
Yeah, I'm interested to hear how the use case for leadership programs play out because it's quite a big focus of what I do, and I can definitely see how it would supplement. I don't know that I could see a whole program kind of being run through text, but then again, Super Mega Boss probably could do something like that. So maybe I just haven't advanced that far, but it does seem like things like best practices are, you could put in nudge format and are probably really well suited to it.
Yeah, so first I'll just say I can tell we've got folks who know what they're doing on the call because I think that's the most exact answers I've gotten to this, and I've given this presentation a number of times. So for leadership, I think you'll see specifically, so JavaScript first. That's kind of an obvious one. Folks can disqualify. A few specific reasons as to why though, and we kind of looked at it and said, okay, this doesn't feel like it would be possible, right? A few good reasons why. A several months long intensive curriculum, one-on-one feedback and constant revision is needed. If you think about it from a learning design standpoint, I need to go look at your code base and see your styles, see what you're doing correctly. It's not the same kind of set of concepts going out to everyone like an onboarding might be, for example. And then a deep technical knowledge is required. So it's just a lot of information and not great for text message learning. Leadership, and the reason I laughed is because this is actually, it's sort of a quasi like hybrid use case here. And I think Amy, Nicole, and Allison, you all mentioned to some regard of kind of what would work well for that. So, it's true that leadership has simple and digestible concepts, and success here is knowledge retention or practice. But at the same time that, for a really in-depth leadership course, one-on-one feedback is needed and a potentially really long-term curriculum could take place. And so what we've seen for something like leadership is it's really good for a reinforcement course where trainers could augment a class with a Zoom workshop or pair someone with a mentor. And we've had a lot of kind of leadership 101 courses taught over Arist. And so here's all basic tips, basic practices, exercises. But if I'm going through and, customizing a specific plan to someone based on how they go through that, then that next step, I might want to bring in, a more seasoned leadership type trainer. And so we like to say kind of, it's about where you draw the line in terms of the depth of subject. Intro to leadership, great use case. More in-depth leadership course, great reinforcement use case. Other two, are really great use cases, as I believe Allison had said right out of the gate there. So awesome job there. Best practices for OKRs or goal setting to company managers. We see really simple standard concepts. We're going over a general subject. Educating a large audience here, so it uses the scalability of the tool well. Success here is behavior change and practice, and there's actionable steps. And so we like to say really, really great use cases have a good balance of learning and of action. A lot of things that we'll learn, it's mostly just, relaying information, but something like teaching company managers, there's always an exercise or a next step, or new hires, a next step of, hey, go do this thing, take this action, practice this exercise. And those are really well conducive to this format. And then last one, customers about new product offerings. similar to the last one, our success here is measured by, do they understand what this product is? Are they going to take some sort of action, whether it's speaking to a sales rep or implementing it themselves or something along those lines? And so we often see more public facing use cases that are similar to that as well. And so, the next question I'll often get is, how long does it actually take to convert something I'm working with into text message if I'm trying to frame out, which use cases my team should start with? So we like to say, if you've got like a microlearning course, PDFs, presentations, I have a theory that most learning content doesn't live in Articulate or in some sort of system. It lives in PowerPoint or a PDF of some kind. And so if you've got text-based materials like that, we've seen folks in 1 to 3 hours just kind of say, okay, this content's already pretty pared down. There's already an existing structure to it. I kind of just need to, start paring down the content a bit, decide where I want to perforate it, et cetera, et cetera. And so that only takes them a few hours to build, let's say like a 5 to 10 day course. If there's a video-based workshop or they're building, a 5 to 10 day text message course from scratch, it can take longer, up to, 6, 8, or I've seen 10 hours. Depends on how long the workshop is, if there's a transcript, things like that. But again, what we're trying to show folks here is that, you want to start with your text-based things that have an existing structure to them, just to save yourself some time, and then explore these other use cases at the same time. Most e-learning takes weeks or sometimes even months to actually build really effectively if it's really rich media or really in-depth. And so for text message learning, this is a really good tool for kind of, let's take these basic intro use cases, let's get them built, let's send these things out. And then as Amy had mentioned earlier, you can go edit things live as courses are going on. So let's adapt things based on what we're hearing, include learner responses, et cetera, et cetera.
Ryan, can you speak to that piece a little bit in terms of learner responses? So when we've been using technology, thinking about taking some of my current courseware and being able to put it into this format, I can see on the, like I've got a PDF, or a PowerPoint and want to convert it into text course format, that piece is really easy, right? It's the chunking out of that content and it's the framing of what input do I want to get from my learner population? What questions do I want to start asking? For us, when we use technology, and particularly where in our tools where we have chatbots or AI, so much work goes into what are the use cases, like what are the interactions that we want to develop with our learner? And so if we're seeking input from them, what are all the possible things that we might get from a learner? And then the development of response to that is where a lot of the investment is. So can you talk about the in the text message courses, how much is actually like AI driven response, and we're trying to make it smarter and customizable over time, versus we're trying to use text message courses as a way to deliver information and prompt action, and we're going to collect some input during along the way, but it's not intended to be that kind of AI driven full interaction kind of experience.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would, great question. It's more the latter than the former. And so the reason being that we actually tested in the early days AI-driven models, chatbot models, and what we found is that it was just far too complex for most folks to actually build meaningful learning. It would take them, 3 months just to build one small course, right? And so what we found to be a lot more effective is actually a hybrid. I'll just show you super quickly in a dashboard here. This is the dashboard. It's very easy to navigate, and I'll kind of, everything under getting started tab will walk you through here. But Allison, I think just to answer your question, so if I go in here to a course and I come down, what it actually looks like when I'm adding a question itself is I might come down here, add a multiple choice or open-ended question. And then for something like a multiple choice question, I'll set custom responses based on the option folks text back. And so we found this to be a really good medium of, often folks will do scenario-based questioning, where even if it's an open-ended response, it might be, here's a good example of this happens at work, a manager's in this situation, what would you do in this situation? And then there's an auto response that says, thanks for your response. Here's a few good examples of what we would recommend doing in this situation. And so we've seen things like scenario-based, we've seen kind of some self-driven, but we don't try to make it too much more complex than that. These are things we're looking into just because we found it takes folks down a path of really, takes them months or months to build their first course.
Absolutely. Yep. Thanks.
Of course. I guess I'll just, while we're paused, any other questions I can take just on kind of anything we've covered so far, and I'll make sure to pause after I go through a few more things too to do that as well. Nope. Awesome. Oh, Amy, I saw your mic was unmuted. I didn't know if you had a thought. Amy posed.
Well, I was just gonna reinforce the fact that the use case right now is less of that AI driven, and I think it's you're right. Like I was just in my head like playing out what that looks like, and it is a Herculean effort to try and estimate, you know, what's happening in terms of having that chat box piece of it. I like it from a standard of, hey, I can create a couple of different responses that feel somewhat customized, and I've had luck with the use case that you're talking about in terms of giving people a scenario, having them respond to it in terms of how they've gotten it done, and then getting and collecting that information back, and then assessing, okay, is the course reinforcing some of the messaging that I want it to reinforce, or have I missed the mark in terms of what I'm trying to get across in each one of the activities. The other thing is, I've been doing 5-day courses, which I find is kind of interesting because I've had different sort of uptakes on the length of courses, because I took a 15-day course and I have no attention span, so I got bored. So I was figuring from a timing standpoint, I think depending on the timing and spacing, it's really interesting to see, because I'm going to play with that over I've got a couple of courses in queue, and I'm just going to play with in terms of how much do people want, because I release it to the general public, and I've gotten a couple messages back like, stop this, how do like people do get fatigue from it. So part of it is like the experimentation on what works. And Allison, in your case, like you've got, and Amy, to your point too, like you guys have, you know, captive audiences, which is kind of interesting to play with. So I just my experience in using it thus far, and some of the experiments I've done have been interesting to see what I get back.
Yeah, that's a great point for sure. I mean, and for some extra context too, often what we'll do is, you know, like Nicole or Allison for your use cases, is folks will come to us with a specific audience and a specific use case, kind of when they're first filing this, and we'll say, okay, based on this, based on a bunch of similar courses, here's kind of our recommendation based on things like length, and so it saves you some time there. Nicole, did you have a question?
Yeah, I did. So one of the things that you said, or that was on the slide around not good for, was around collaborative learning. And I guess that surprised me a little bit, not because I think that it's really easy to collaborate, you know, via text when you're just interacting with kind of your text message. But I was just wondering, you know, what, I guess, are there courses you've come across or other platforms that you use to kind of encourage collaborative learning that's happening outside of the text message? But I'm assuming a lot of these courses will be kind of cohorts of people doing it, whether they know each other or don't know each other. So I was wondering if you could speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, you know, and I'll probably make sure to adjust language here. I think, you know, we've seen a lot of collaborative things done. We usually like to say, don't start with these highly collaborative based learnings, because for the most part, the first use cases we see are things like, I'm gonna, you know, offboard this training into text message and then send it out to 3,000 people, right? And so there's just far too many there. What I will say is what we've seen for a lot of folks is they'll launch a course and then simultaneously make a group chat of some kind. And so, you know, folks will, in one kind of stream or in a certain stream of messages, get their text messages, but then in a WhatsApp group or an SMS group separately, they can ask specific questions, go more in depth into things. I think that's more conducive to maybe when there's like 50 learners at once and you can make a few different chats. But we've kind of optimized for when there's like 200 learners to 1,000 to 10,000. What do you actually want that to look like? And so usually it's a good place people go into, but they don't often start there, if that helps.
I would think particularly for the reinforcement use case that, you know, like we might have a cohort, like in my portfolio, you know, 2,000 new senior managers who are going through an experience at one time. The reinforcement is going to get them into smaller cohorts to carry the live learning or self-study learning going forward. And so this, while they, you know, maybe we would hit send to 2,000 people at once with a text course, we would likely have, you know, on day 5, we're going to get together back in those small cohort groups to reflect and discuss learnings, that kind of thing. So I would see it as a combination, because we also, Nicole, would want to have the ability for the group of people to then debrief, what they experience and how does it tie back to what we've done in other parts of the program.
Yeah, that's exactly how I was thinking about it. In working together with kind of smaller cohorts, and it's really playful, right? That's what I really like about this is using the text message content, and then depending on what the content is, I'm thinking kind of leadership or development of culture, these kinds of things where actually interaction should happen. But that the text message part can be a really playful way to draw people together.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess one last thing I'll mention too that we've seen is Allison, to the use case you discussed, is like on day 5 I might include a link to a Slack community that have folks join, and then they'll discuss questions there. So we'll make specific recommendations usually, but for larger groups, something like that is often where they'll sort of point people. One thing I'll also mention is we're launching a whole new set of features in about a month and a half, and one of those is going to be integrations with Slack and MS Teams. And so we are experimenting with, if you've got a massive group within a large organization, what does that look like to do a Slack course? And that's probably more conducive to collaboration. Awesome. So again, when looking at current trainings, should I convert this training to a text message course? Thinking of outcome, are we looking for behavior change, knowledge retention? Is this similar to a discussed use case, or are we just trying to, transfer tons of info at once? Visibility, is this a training we need to get in front of many employees? So we've seen plenty of courses built for 10, 20, 50 folks, but I think after 100 is where they really see the benefit of the scalability of the tool and kind of the autonomous nature of it and asynchronous nature of it. And the current materials, how short form are our current trainings? Is there kind of an existing structure to the learning, or am I starting from square one? Those are all good things to think about when kind of piecing out how long is it going to take me to get version 1 of this out the door. So usually we kind of we'll pause here and just to recap with folks, what are some of the top trainings in your organization? What would kind of work well into a text message course? I think you've all mentioned a few already, and then kind of considering those common training needs. So I'll pause here again. From here, I can show a bit more about the dashboard. I can dive into a few use cases more specifically. Would be happy to kind of answer kind of questions or direct based on what's useful.
Ryan, can you talk a little bit about any data you've collected around generational differences in adoption of this? So my portfolio, as I mentioned, has retiring PPMDs who have maybe been with us for 35 years, and then a 21-year-old campus hire who's never had a job before. And I would bet that the former population is not going to be as savvy or receptive to this kind of learning as my 21-year-old college grad.
Yeah, absolutely. So a few things the design folks threw in the appendix here. I actually just remembered this was in here, but what's interesting is we've actually done a lot of research across like 10, 15,000 folks, and we've seen no substantive difference between the younger folks and the older folks. We always thought, okay, Generation Z, millennials, they're going to love this. Older folks, it's going to take some convincing. What I think we've found that's really fascinating that was kind of different from that is, while there's a slightly faster response rate when the folks are younger, the difference we found is that for the older folks, they're the ones who dislike the more in-depth training tools more because it's more technology for them to learn versus they already text their kids or grandkids. They know how to text back someone. And so they like it a lot just because it's more technically light. It's easier for them to use. So we've jokingly said internally that we think all things considered, it's actually even better for older users than for younger, but the younger ones, of course, know how to use it, know how to text back, things like that.
I love that data point because you're right. Like I get 20,000 texts from my mom every day. She is a great use case for someone to learn something new by text. So
I imagine it'll be really funny to see what you get back from my mom. She's one who likes to speak into text and let it translate itself, which is always a good time. I was wondering how much this is being used with schools. If you've kind of I branched out in that way, because there are a few. Yeah, I have a few roles with schools that is making me think, ooh, I should connect you to them.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've done some things with school districts. I think that for them, they often have just a lower budget to experiment with new types of training tools, and they have a whole different set of kind of requirements that sometimes will take like a year or two to go through technically wise. So what I will share is that we've done a lot of training with, like we just did something with a school district in Georgia where they had to train 10,000 school administrators, teachers, district workers, and basically partners and vendors on diversity inclusion training. And so often kind of a good first use case for them is like we call it training the trainers, but training kind of admins or those folks. With training kids, we've seen a lot of really good use cases around like homework delivery and classroom training and things like that. But it's not typically kind of use case number one. It's like use case number 4 or 5. Awesome. Other questions I can answer. I'd say the two things folks usually would like to see is either I can show some specific customer use cases, I can jump into the dashboard, or we can just brainstorm about kind of how to get started at your organization. Any one of those three kind of most helpful. I want to make sure I use everyone's time valuably as well.
Can you talk to us a little bit about the metrics that you collect?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So on a high level, within the dashboard, you can see things like completion rates, response rates, answer accuracy rates. Kind of a good gauge for looking at these things is completion rate is just, did they give some, point of interaction? So did they, are they giving a response at least every few days? Are they not opting out of the course? So base measures like that. We usually say based on the content, either answer accuracy rate or the actual qualitative responses, which you can go see, and I'll show you in a second, are a really good gauge of kind of how much has someone completed something. Answer accuracy rate is when you give something that requires a quantitative answer, like a number, multiple choice question. What's the percentage of questions asked that were correct in total? And you can break this down by course, by learner, obviously, and then response rate. And so, of the, about 30 to 40%, usually a good gauge, it's of the text sent, what kinds of responses am I getting? And what we'll say to folks is the most helpful thing that you can do, and we're, with the features I mentioned, we're also unleashing a whole, cohort analysis, insights, and things like that. But right now you can grab all the raw data from here. Is seeing things like, okay, let me actually go into one of these courses. I can see here, by day what these responses were. And for this, let's see, okay, here was this person's, there's a bunch of responses here to load. What's this person's email? What kind of response did they give? And if I go to the user list, so outside of just this raw responses, which I can download, I can also go see, what's their sign up method, what progress they are through the course. Let me just pull this up here so you can see. So you can see data like have they completed it, they become inactive, and those sorts of metrics. We say most helpful is kind of look at responses, see those things. And again, we have things like insights and cohort analysis coming within about a month and a half. Awesome.
Ryan, have you designed courses that are, the model I'm thinking is like choose your own adventure, but like flexible in that if you have kind of your rough course content in the tool, but based on your, like that metric said, something like 67% was the quantitative response of people getting it right. So then you're like, whoa, people actually are not getting this. Like I thought that my content was going to drive better understanding of the concept, but if it's at 67%, like I need to go back and reinforce. So do you kind of like flex that text message course in the, like if you're going to have a 5-day course, you're like, okay, by day 3 we need to actually change the messaging based on what we're receiving from the learners?
Sure. So sort of kind of to the question earlier, yes and no, in terms of us trying to make sure we don't complicate it too much for the designer. So again, what we'll often see is that folks will use something like the multiple choice feature, and then if something's correct or not, you can actually do a full more than screen length response to any multiple choice answer. And so they'll often say, if it was correct, here's some more information. If it's not correct, maybe I want you to answer this additional question or go explore these resources or watch this video. And that's kind of as deep as it will go. We are looking into things like, can I skip days 5 through 8 if you get all these correct? Or, can I kind of self-direct to start midway through? But for now, we kind of leave it at this level of complexity.
I was even thinking just like less more like I'm in the dashboard, I have my course, but then by day 3, I realize it's not going how I thought I thought I would, or a lot of the questions coming in are leading to new topics that I want to make sure are covered, and so rather than having a separate 5-day text message course in a month, I can come into the dashboard and say, on days 4 and 5, I actually want to like modify my content, ask different questions, provide different resources so that I actually have the flexibility to learn from the first couple of days of experience and like quickly pivot if needed.
Oh yeah, okay. Yeah, thank you for clarifying. And you can absolutely do that. So all courses can be edited in real time. We'll often hear folks say like, okay, on day 2, I get a bunch of responses like this. So I went and changed to day 5. The good thing is because they're sent once per day, you've got like 24, 48, 36-hour windows to do that, just based on those responses.
Yeah, that makes sense. We often are, we ask questions of our learner population before we have like a Zoom training or a live training pre-COVID, right? It's like, what kinds of questions do you have for the panel, for example? I can see us wanting to put in questions on a day 1 and then say, okay, and then by day 4, we're going to give you, like, we prioritize this topic based on your inputs, then like that's what we're going to be including later in the week. Or if we're doing a cohort connect on Slack or MS Teams by day 5, like we have now input from the learner audience as to like what are the topics that we want to have addressed in that cohort follow-up.
Awesome. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that sounds like a great use case there as well, and definitely something you could do here. So just sorry, Amy, go ahead.
It's an unrelated question, so I will let you continue.
I was just going to give some kind of next steps for getting started, but I can kind of do that at the end. So would love to take your question.
My question is around pricing. So someone who I know was supposed to join who couldn't join wanted to know. So she's based in the UK and has a global team. And so she was sort of saying like, okay, I know there's text messaging fees and things that apply. I know that there's WhatsApp groups that we can do. She was also talking about, I believe, wine in Asia because she's got a big Asia contingent. Can you talk a little bit about pricing as well as any efforts to expand? Because I know originally you also had Facebook Messenger as an option, but you've scaled back from that just because Facebook's kind of the devil. Great for you guys, but what are some of the things that you're thinking about in terms of like pricing, but also other tools that you might be able to send on?
Yeah, sure thing. So our job is to simplify it as much as possible. There's, I guess, first thing I'll mention with data and messaging rates is that the way the types of message we send for Arist courses, while messaging rates can apply, the data rates don't apply. And then folks don't typically, we actually haven't had any learners come back and just say, this doesn't fit in my data plan. The reason being, often you're getting, 20, 30 text messages. And so about 99% of the US has unlimited messaging plans right now, but a smaller amount has unlimited data plans. And so that's why we stay in messaging, not in data. The way we make it super simple for all you folks is we basically will just do, if it's internal training, a base rate of $3 per learner per month. And then we'll often do custom pricing options that have that come down in bulk. And so if you're like, okay, I've got 1,000 learners that I'm training, then we'll say, okay, we'll start at $3 per learner per month. Often we'll knock off a percentage for things like procurement and whatnot. And then we'll actually add some a la carte services there too. So if you want us to onboard the entire team, train everyone how to write text messages, we actually have a content team in-house that can build text message courses for you with a 1-week turnaround. And so we'll even include some options there for, okay, if I want to pay $2,000, hand you all these materials and have you come back a week later with a full text message course. We can do that as well. So I'll make sure to send over kind of our standard, the pricing options to this group after, in addition to a few other things. But what I'll also send over is our pilot package, which if your organization has more than, I believe it's 3,000 learners, most of our enterprise clients will get started that way. And it's kind of just a flat rate, 3-month period payment where we'll go through and we will build the first course for you, train everyone on how to write for this format, identify use cases, present a scale-up plan, and kind of do all the ins and outs that we'll need, like going through procurement and security checks, things like that.
Ryan, can you talk about kind of like IP and just ownership of content. So at Deloitte, if I think about course content going out from text, anything that we offer today that's hosted anywhere has multi-factor authentication. You know, we're like very specific about designing things that only our Deloitte professionals can get to. So if I think about taking some of my content and saying like, well, I'm going to text it to my 2,000 senior managers, you know, is there anything that prevents those senior managers from copying or screen capturing and sharing with other people? At which point our, you know, our Office of General Counsel and risk teams would raise alarms.
Yeah, sure thing. So two things to keep in mind here. So the first is that when we give like a pilot agreement or when someone signs up under our terms of service, there's an NDA in place, in which case, you know, on our side at least, we won't disclose any content. It's all the IP of whoever inputs it in the system. It's their ownership. Additionally, when someone signs up in the terms of service, we have things that outline, and I can send all this along because the procurement folks usually love to see all this stuff. Things that outline, you know, the sharing of content, content being, you know, when someone opts into a course, similar to receiving an email from your boss, right? Opting in that sensitive content, they're liable if they share it and things like that. So that's all in the terms of service, but I can just tell you, kind of zooming out of all the legal stuff, we were concerned about that in the early days. We actually haven't seen anyone do that, just because folks will tell us it's a lot easier for them to just like sign up if it's the right person. And usually it's some sort of corporate training that it's not like financial data, for example, it's not as sensitive to just being copied and sent around.
Just so I'm clear, so nothing in the tool itself prevents, you know, copying and sending the text to somebody else who's outside of your user group or screen capturing, but the language for use helps to appease procurement and general counsel and risk in terms of, by signing up for the course, you're agreeing to these restrictions.
Yeah, so yes, but also I'll mention that you know, within, like, there's no stopping someone from, let's say if I get a text on my phone, you know, I screenshot that and send it to someone else. As anything else, you could send to a personal device, someone could take a picture, right? But at the same time, with content in here, there's a set of permissioning for things like data, course admins, course builders, and things like that. So whoever the classroom admin is will have visibility into who has access to what within the dashboard.
Thanks.
Awesome. Other final questions I can answer before? Oh, go ahead, Nicole.
You might have said this, and sorry if I missed it, but which platforms do you use? So regular text messaging, I got, but in terms of, and Amy's question got to this earlier, but maybe I missed it again. So like WhatsApp, what ways can you deploy this?
Yeah, sure thing. So apologies, I think I just forgot to mention earlier, but SMS and WhatsApp are the two that we support right now. We scaled back Facebook Messenger just because of some things on that side, and it wasn't a popular option. But we are, what's the end of February? I believe by early April to mid-April, we're releasing Slack, MS Teams, and then after that, we'll open it up to looking into other messaging systems. So next on the list will include Signal, Line, Telegram, and those things. And so Slack and MS Teams are up next, but for now, SMS and WhatsApp. So, you know, just kind of, I'll make sure to stand after there's any questions. I want to make sure I use everyone's time valuably. So what I will send along to Amy, and she can kind of, or actually, Amy, I'll sync with you after about who should send that along, but I'll include a few things. So the first is kind of the pricing options and pilot packages that I mentioned for how organization-wide folks usually get started. I'll also include, if you're just, you know, oh, I just want to play around with this, build kind of my first course, send it out to a few folks. I'll include a link to just spin up your own Arist classroom just like this. If you've got, you know, if you want to start with like 5 to 10 folks, that's all free. You can just get started right away. And then I'll also make sure to send along both our white paper and our welcome deck. And so that just gives an overview of what is this? What did Ryan just cover? What are some good use cases? And so that's really good because often folks have to go speak to some sort of a buyer. They have to get some sort of approval. And so I'll send over kind of just a high level of that. Last thing, Allison, to your question, I'll make sure to include a link to our Trust Center, which includes a lot of policies, things that procurement folks like to see, data privacy, GDPR, phone number security, and it outlines all of that. So I'll kind of send everything along, and then I'll just make sure to check in periodically to see how can I help, how can I folks get started, et cetera, et cetera. Any final questions that would be helpful, or other things I can send over in addition to all of that?
When did you say again that your Teams and Slack coordination is going to come out?
Yeah, so probably mid to end of April, I would say, is
Mid to
when
end of
we'll do
April,
a rollout of Slack and MS Teams. So if that's an interest, then typically, for a pilot package, it takes about 2 to 3 months to really get organizations set up to do that first pilot. I'd say if you kick that off now, then by the time the organization looks at scale up or at running a full course, that will be in place to be able to do that.
Thanks very much. This is exciting.
Of course. Thanks so much, everyone. It was great to meet all of you. I will send all that stuff over right now. I'll stay on for another minute if you got questions, but have a great rest of the day.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ryan.